Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome from the side of the world that you're connecting today. Welcome to this session. The role of financial institutions in the financing of circular economy as part of the event from the initiative from UNEP-FI, the Roundtable for Sustainable Finances for Latin America and the Caribbean. The truth is that my name is Ignacio Sanchez, and I work for the regional office for Latin America and the Caribbean. From UNEP-FI and working in the issues of circular economy, consumption, and sustainable products. And it's an honor for me to moderate the session today in this panel in such an important issue such as that of circular economy and the financing thereof, which is a key issue in the Latin America and the Caribbean sector, especially now that we have to rebuild and rethink in our economies after the economic crisis generated by COVID. And the triple planetary crisis that we're facing at the moment as well from UNEP and the United Nations, we are talking for a while now about a climate crisis, one of degradation of ecological systems and contamination, all this caused by some unsustainable patterns of consumption and production, and therefore the circular economy serves as a sustainable economic development strategy as a solution given this triple planetary crisis and the recovery regarding this planetary crisis with a focus that addresses these residues in design and maintaining the value of the products and materials as high as possible and be able to regenerate the natural systems. And for this, precisely, we require having innovation, we require technological development, we require performing changes in the business models, and for that we require having resources and funding. So all of this transition towards a circular economy in Latin America has a key stakeholder, which is the financial sector and the financial industry that has to support in this transition. So therefore, there are initiatives, and this change is happening now in several countries. There are companies and institutions that are adopting the principles of the circular economy, and we're happy to say we can talk about the Coalition of Circular Economy for Latin America and the Caribbean from UNEP. We're coordinating with other agencies and with countries in the region with this coalition, which is a platform for exchanging knowledge and generating tools and mobilization of resources. Among the projects that we're spearheading since the coalition and with the support of other agencies, we have a study regarding the funding of circular economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, a study where we pretend to seek or analyze the various policies, regulatory tools, financial tools that as of today are underway in the region to better understand how they can fund the circular economy. And we also, with this study, we pretend drafting a series of recommendations or conclusions about how to strengthen the regulatory framework in the financial sector so that it may fund the circular economy models. We're going to talk a little bit more about this during the panel. And without further ado, in the panel, we have a very good panel today with great experts in these issues of sustainable funding. Today we have Teresa Rossi from the Escolia Institute. She's a project coordinator. We also have Maria Sawenza, Superintendent of Sustainability from the Santander Bank, and Franco Pizza, the Sustainability Director at Bancolombia. The first question, and I wanted to formulate to Teresa to land a few concepts of the circular economy, and we're talking about sustainable funding, and we're talking about funding for the circular economy. Is it the same thing? What differences are there? What criteria are there? that we can consider precisely for this issue of funding of the circular economy? Well, thank you very much for that question, Ignacio. I'm going to share my screen because I brought some diagrams that could probably help us answer that very question, which doesn't have a simple answer, but nevertheless is a key question to facilitate the understanding of this issue. I am the project coordinator from the Scholars Institute, which is the choices in Spanish, and I'm coordinating the research team that is developing, with the support of UNEP-FI, that research on the funding of circular economy in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are also with Exchange for Change in Brazil, and which is a consultancy that is specialized in circular strategies. Well, the question is not a simple one, but we can begin by answering as follows. Funding for circular economy is not the same thing of what we call sustainable funding or green finance, but it can be considered as an aspect of that sustainable funding. But from all those new economies, the green economy, the carbon economy, the circular economy, is the concept that brings forth a vision of the integration among all stakeholders of the chain and a vision of business models, of market strategies that are specific. So in comparison with what we call sustainable funding, which is basically investments determined by socio-environmental issues and the famous ESG, which is advancing in strides, but we still don't have a clear vision of what are the indicators and the metrics that comprise the framework. And when we're talking about circular economy, we have a few aspects that differentiate it. For example, in sustainable funding, we can assess the sustainability or not of a single project or a single company when we're talking about private equity. When we're talking about circular economy, we have to take a look at all the stakeholders from the productive chain and think about integration. So we're not only talking about sustainability or not of a stakeholder in that chain, but rather we're talking about the integration of the entire chain to provide greater efficiency to the consumption and the extraction of natural resources and the flow of natural resources throughout that entire chain, as not to have destruction of the value, but rather have aggregation and maintenance of its value. And we're also talking about, when we're talking about circular economy, of metrics and business models that are specific that we're going to address in the next slide. In comparison with financing for innovation, which is a key component of circular economy, we also have important differences in the way we think. For example, when we're talking about funding of innovation, we normally take a look at the level of the technological activity of a certain company or a certain project. And normally, that is measured with an index that is called TRL, which is Technology Readiness Level, TRL, which is an indicator developed by NASA that allows assessing different technologies in different sectors. And it's seen basically as the level of technology development. So when we're talking about circular economy, we're not talking about just technology or science or digital strategies, for example, but rather we're talking about an integration of a symmetry among the technological and other aspects, especially the business model, the market strategy, and that is something very necessary when we're thinking about circular economies. So the financing for circular economy is intimately related to sustainable development and innovation, but more than that, because it has metrics and business models and a vision that's specific, which is multi-stakeholder, and it has to consider all stakeholders in the chain. Having said this, we have a little bit about what are those strategies and those business models when we're talking and specifically about circular economy. So in terms of strategy, we have the framework of the 9 R's, which is a framework supported by the UNEP and the environment and other stakeholders, even financial ones that are already starting to take a look at this framework. And we have a series of circular strategies that are already identified in hierarchical terms. The R8 or 9 are the less ambitious strategies that attempt to improve the use and application of materials throughout the productive chain. Then we go on to more ambitious strategies that have to do with the extension of the life cycle of the product, as not to have value destruction, and so that the materials that get to the end of the chain can be reinserted and reused. And there we're talking about refurbish, remanufacture, etc., so that they may serve for the development of their products and services. And lastly, when we're arriving at the more ambitious strategies, we're talking about a full transformation in the product design from its conception as not to have destruction of value. And there we're talking about strategies that have to do directly with the business models that are circular, that go from less ambitious to most ambitious. For example, less ambitious, we have there those circular supplies, which are to think about, for example, in productive inputs that are circular because they can be reutilized, because they're renewable, biodegradable, and they don't generate waste. The value of those materials is not destroyed. And in more ambitious terms, we're talking basically about a business model that transforms the product into a service, and that is key for the circular economy. For example, the Michelin tire company, it's no longer the sale of tires anymore, but rather the leasing of the time of transportation, whether by a bus or truck that uses these. And the companies, and they pay for the time that they're spending with that service. In other words, it was transformed, this tire, which was a product, into a service. And so on, we can see that there are other values in the circular economy can actually have that possibility of dematerializing, in other words, of consuming less natural resources and using materials that can be reinserted along the chain. And we can easily associate the most ambitious strategies in terms of those R's with the circular business models that are also more ambitious. So, if we transform those business models and strategies into indicators and clear metrics, those metrics can support the decision of investing or not in a business, or to measure the level of circularity that exists in a particular business. And we hope that this can be used by the various financial agencies to take financing towards a circular economy, and not only to the socio-environmental criteria that are being mobilized within the ESG framework. So I will stop there. There's a lot more to say about that topic, but I hope those slides can already help you a little bit to give you an understanding of this. And we're available to talk a little bit more about those differences that I think are very interesting to understand if we truly want to foster financing of the circular economy specifically. Well, thank you very much, Teresa. The truth is very interesting, and as I said, there are similarities, and I can see there might be connections as well in the green financing or sustainable financing with that of circular economy. And as you've presented it, the structure, the circular economy model also sets forth a rethinking not of how it was being assessed thus far regarding all those sustainable finance issues. But so therefore these are challenges, but I can also see presented in the case of, for example, with the Michelin tire company, those interesting things. And that's why I'm asking Amalia and Franco now, in your experience, And in your sector specifically, what are those challenges and opportunities that you have begun ascertaining in this road toward the circular economy and support to that funding of a circular economy? What type of strategies you are starting and spearheading from your banks? If you'd like, we can start with you, Mike. Well, thank you very much, Ignacio, and thank you very much, Teresa, also for your excellent information that you bring forth in the concepts. I think they challenge us to think in different ways. Let me tell you what we've been doing, and we believe in this, and it's that vision of that circular economy, which is a mindset, just first and foremost. It's a different way of thinking, and from that different way of thinking is that we develop the practices. And the first thing that I want to bring forth is how, as banks, we have to first demonstrate and do our due diligence in what we're doing internally. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the business side. For example, we have started thinking about the issue for quite some time now, from the consumption of water, energy, paper. Last year, for example, we reduced about 21% of water consumption and energy 7%. And we have a goal, for example, of getting to until the year 2025 by consuming only renewable energy from renewable sources. So all our administrative buildings already have 100% renewable energy. And we have certain states in where we already have 100% renewable energy. But we want to advance throughout the operation and also to the data processing center that requires a more specific solution. So with regard to residues, for example, we've been working quite a lot in reducing residues and waste that go they say it, sanitary waste, but reduce the number of waste that stem from the bank. And we process all organic waste from the headquarters building to reduce the amount that goes to the effluents. We're one of the first banks that go to that, have that specific technology locally, so that everything that comes out of the cafeterias, for example, already go on directly to equipment that reduce, and then we reuse that in the gardens as fertilizer. So we try to have that mindset. And taking a further step regarding business, with that same mindset, our idea is to see how we can help our clients to implement that type of solutions of a circular economy. The point that Teresa brings forth regarding to technology, as a matter of fact, is a very important one. We had an experience with Tetra Pak in 2007 that, as a matter of fact, we financed a new technology that allowed separating paper from plastic and aluminum to be able to generate that circular economy through those inputs. And what we've seen is how to help to compost and substitute materials, separate them, and to have a platform of products that would allow us actually providing an answer to all those issues that we know that we have these, the clients have to adapt to local legislation and such. And so we're seeing a great opportunity to advance further in those solutions and to become an active agent, not only in offering when the customer calls us, but rather to take one step ahead of what might be coming along, because we have a lot of opportunities having to do with, for example, plastics and different modes of energy. As a matter of fact, we can see some opportunities there. I wanted to give the floor also to Franco, if I may. Amalia, thank you very much. And Ignacio, it's a pleasure for me to be here in this talk about this topic that apparently seems rather disruptive for the region. But clearly, when we start creating an analysis, it should distract us how the exoticness of the concept. I think it's a very interesting concept and a very important one, as Amalia has demonstrated. It's a different mindset, definitely. I think was one of the main challenges that we've found so far. From Bancolombia, our purpose is to foster the sustainable economic development to see well-being for everybody. That puts us in a permanent topic of thinking about the way and how and what. And the circular economy is a great enabler of sustainability. and of other issues, such as the ones that have to do with throughout the climate change organizations issues, because we have to rethink about these models and biodiversity, which is the next boundary that we have to face. Okay, so because when we're thinking about this, rather, we go from an extractivist model to another one that has a better design that allows us to rethink several times the use of resources, and there are multiple opportunities there. And we've accompanied many customers in the route of advancing. For example, when Amalia was talking about her experience in each one of the organizations, what that route allows us to understand about opportunities and the opportunities of continuing to reuse, rethinking, redesigning, all those R's that Teresa was showing us in the route, which are very important for a circular economy. And so within that route is where we finally find the opportunities. So let's not lose sight of the fact that the circular economy has three main pillars. And you've seen those in those networks. The first one is design. We have to think the models differently, and that's one of the first challenges that we found for accompaniment and financing, because we come from a linear model, which is apparently successful, but that is not recognizing a lot of externalities of that raw materials that are incorporated, very economic within the cost scheme, but it's also, we're not thinking about what can be required in the following decades to guarantee their provision when they're no longer there, when the ecosystems are effective and they're no longer delivering those raw materials. So what does that imply? That we have to redesign differently. We have to have a different vision in the long term. The success we've been shown is just for the short term, but unfortunately, that doesn't work. In 1 year or quarter might be successful, but we're thinking about in longer periods of time, we start having very complex problems. So the first thing is to design very well. Second pillar is use. And that is completely liaised to design. We cannot design solutions from the real sector, from the economy, that does not have a use that is considering all those issues, because quite simply we can say froze. Some technical issues, please hold on. Apparently it froze. Here we go. Because it's a residue of everything that's going to become a raw material for something else. It's not going to go to landfills, and as a matter of fact, nothing should go there. And that's when we start seeing that from the use, it's very well conceived. Amalia was also talking about the third pillar, which is systems. This is not done, and from the design, we have to think about the use and the system. How do we reintegrate those raw materials by working again with the vendors that could be our vendors or third-party vendors? But we have to see the integrated system. That's when we identify design, use, and system is what we're accompanying and financing. We start realizing that we're financing issues such as energy efficiency, which forms part of a new use of these resources, that we're financing renewable energy, and that, for example, those biogas or part of the solution, because sometimes a residue from a particular organic material, any crop is going to generate an important organic discharge, but that is susceptible to be used by energetic use, and that is a circular model. And I'm not taking those residues to a landfill to generate more greenhouse effect gases, but rather cleaner production. We're financing and sustainable development with new materials, reincorporated. We're financing the manufacturer that is using all these recycling products to reincorporate a higher percentage of raw materials in terms of textiles, plastics, and all the issues of sustainable issues have to have an important point in the market level, and that's what we're accompanying and financing in that dynamic. So the financial services follow those lines, and not only from credit. We have models from leasing. The leasing companies have to understand these are models that almost pure models of circular economy. They haven't realized, they think that they're leasing assets. That is the more pure model, because they're in a model of, no, I don't need the asset. I need the use thereof that the asset generates. So I could have a vehicle that 85% of the time is parked in the garage, but it could help, it could serve somebody else. And so that's when we start analyzing, increasing the, numbers, 3, 4, 5 vehicles in a single day. So how is that modality of the use of those natural resources? So to close with this portion of the first question is how to use then those finances to follow that dynamic from the credit, from leasing, the renting, the funding as well, because every time there are more resources that are migrating this route from bond generation with sustainability issues, but with inclusion of circular economy strategies, and they're very competitive. The companies that are following this route can better derive better opportunities at the market level. Today from Bancolombia, we have a commitment in this purpose, and is to mobilize funding in these next 10 years. At least $140 billion. We're going to be connected with the 2030 agenda. And this year we're funding issues that are connected very directly with circular economy, $2.3 billion. So there are resources. There is the financing. There are many projects that we've been working on, and we're starting to work on the route that involves investment issues, where by 2024, we hope that 90% of the assets under management that we have from our asset management are oriented to companies with an ESG funds or other types. And the circular economy is essential in that route. And finally, the financial models have to be accompanied by non-financial services. A great challenge in this issue is the connection that is called symbiosis or symbiotic connection between industries, that sometimes an industry doesn't know what it has, and a residue is might be raw material for another one. So they don't know what to do, so they can assume it as a cost, a problem, something that can generate an environmental fine, and they need to have that money. And that's where we're also starting to identify a series of opportunities to go in the non-financial to can help to guarantee that that third component, which is the system, can work adequately. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing, Ignacio, and the financing that we're granting and the bets that we have for the following years, and that vision that we not lose sight of, and the use of the system so that those R's can actually take life within these companies. Well, thank you very much, Franco and Amalia. The truth is, it's very interesting to actually see what you've been doing, and Amalia was saying, and also what you've been doing, Franco. I have one thing left, and I think it's very important. You've already said that there are steps being taken. I think that I see this as a part of these puzzle pieces that are starting to form an image for renewable energies and sustainable energies and such. Now, perhaps what we're missing is to finish that puzzle to see the circular economy in its whole spectrum. So to see this puzzle, something very interesting that you've said is that we have to rethink the design and also think long-term, perhaps. And if I go to the next question, I start thinking about where we're at now regarding tools and the financial solutions that we have today. For example, they've had that long-term thinking, and it's aligned with these principles of circular economy, or new solutions are necessary. The same thing with the tools. And the financial system, based on many of its investments and decisions in tools for risk evaluation, for example, that already keep in mind many of these aspects that are social, environmental, and such. But as you've said, this circular economy is seen more as a whole, as a system, and those tools are prepared to face this evaluation of the circular economy, or do we need to have new tools for that? Should we start in the same order, Amalia and then Franco? Yeah, ladies first. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Ignacio, for that question, and Franco, also thank you very much for sharing with us your experiences. To answer your question, Ignacio, I see it sort of like with the experience that we've had here, that is sort of a little bit of the two things, a little bit of seeing the models and the appetite, the risk, and to adjust sometimes, fine-tune the vision of our risk, and eventually to develop new products according to the needs. And to bring, to land these issues, rather. For example, when we're talking about new products, as mentioned by Franco, and we're seeing a growth of the financing that are connected to ESG issues. So, for example, we have a case here, and among those other examples, like a food processing company that wanted a loan, a financing, and we connected them with ESG cells that the client might have. And then we arrived at the solution that they were going to produce 30% the classic less packagings, and that was going to affect a great portion of the funding that they required. So that's just one example of what is happening in our day-to-day. Many a times the customer comes along and they seek that funding, and they don't know inside the opportunities and what they could do. So the role that we have here as banks is to sort of be the challenger and to demonstrate, if you will, those changes that we've talked about, those 9 R's, and where they can go and how far they can go. So that's when we can get to a solution. But there might be, yes, more complex solutions that could require new technologies, and what investments the customer is ready to do to create a specific technology to go wherever they need to act in. So, as a matter of fact, there are a lot of opportunities in that field. For example, last year we closed with $5 billion in also having to do with our finance lines for renewable energy, solar, wind, or those that have to do with others. And we do have a portion which is sometimes difficult to separate, because sometimes inside we have to report what we're doing. We have to sometimes separate within our operation to see what is coming from the circular, what comes from is not. So we start thinking about how to work around that to have more clarity and be more solid in our reports, because that can show us and can give us clearer visions of what our ambition should be with regard to that participation that we have to have here in the bank. And the last example that I wanted to bring forth is connected with what Teresa was talking about regarding about the dematerialization or the reuse. For example, we have begun thinking about our credit cards. We use them, and now there is a renewable plan that we have, and we can throw them away with the plastics. But now we have delivered the very first lot of credit cards by using PVC, and the idea is that in 5 years' time, all of our customer base can have these credit cards with PVC. But the next step is dematerialization, because you know that they're payment forms that can be easily done without any type of using of any type of credit card. So they're here. Customers are already doing it. So we know that it's a matter of cultural issues, and sometimes the customer wants to have his credit card or her credit card. In those cases, we have to have solutions for that, but it also to influence the customer and to facilitate their lives so that they can exit those physical models. So sometimes we have to work on both sides. And how can we, from our day-to-day operations and the relationships, have a better management in this circular economy, and how we can help the customers in seeking their own solutions in their businesses. Thank you, Amalia. Well, Ignacio, on our side, we can say that in terms of what is set forth with this challenge, the financing and the risk issue, I think that we have to attack these in a tactical manner as follows. The first thing is financing will always follow projects that are viable, that have economic returns and close that cycle. We have to see that they're operating with the resources of the market and of the savings holders, that they're going to the credits, and everybody is hoping for those resources to come back. And that is the money how we have to think about our pension funds and salaries, and we're all expecting them for them to come back. We have to go to an ATM and see that we lent to a project that is not going to pay just now. So nobody is expecting that their money is going to be there. But basically what the banks are doing is to intermediate that exercise. So the projects have to be good, and we can see that the circular economy, the projects are profitable, and they're providing greater efficiency, greater competitiveness for those who are implementing them. And I think that logic is leading everybody to find more consistently funding that is needed. So that financing and those is also differentiating. In other words, they're granting rates in the majority of the cases by efforts that the financial agencies that are accompanying these trends and that they want to foster these trends, whereby it's lesser profit for those investments and savers, but what they're looking for is a long-term transformation. So again, if there is not a vision for everybody, there is no future for anyone. So we have to create a better effort to advance in that end. But again, those fundings are going to be more concrete, and they're going to be following that dynamic. So those portfolios are going to grow, and they will be fine-tuning. Ignacio, regarding with the question about new products and with more exotic names that are going to follow up following the circular economy. But let's not lose the practical side. Let's see where we are in that circular economy and how we understand it. And there is a part of that economy, and we can accompany it in a more consistent manner toward the next few years. So with what we have, we can make some strides, and I'm sure in the future we'll see innovations. So what do we see in this disruption? Models from the non-financial that will guarantee the system. That's going to catalyze and speed up decision-making, because today I think that there is no block from the financial standpoint. Perhaps there will be some more complex projects, technologies that haven't been explored that are following the same route, and that will probably have general access from the banking credit and risk capital investment. But there are financial mechanisms for that. But we have venues for that. So, and from the risk financing, I agree in this particular case with Amalia when she says it's a little bit of both. I think that from the risk management standpoint, it's also important to see that there are dynamics that are going to move very quickly and easily. And as in reference to the MacArthur Foundation, which is seeing what they're doing, and they're saying, for example, we're seeing the issue of food and plastics and fashion and other issues. And what are the problems there? Because there are opportunities there. And so that can be solved more quickly, and then the intervention of the regulator in that route can be less required. But let's not lose sight of the fact that if we want to leverage and speed up that type of solution in our market, it's possible and required to have an intervention by the regulator in a practical sense. First, from the taxonomy, from the issuance of what is or not a circular economy. And not only because of an issue of avoiding a greenwash or information that pretends doing something that it's not, but rather particularly so that those benefits that are helping to catalyze these decisions by having differentiated rates can be seen within a dynamic model for risk management. Because if a company starts managing this, their profits are going to go up, and everything inside the company is going to improve, of course, practical sense. So what funding implies from all these sustainability agenda, the climate and others, but also circular economy should, from a regulatory standpoint, have a letter capital assignment. In other words, less reserved for ordinary common loans and that are going to generate important contamination. And those they should also recognize, not only by the counterpart, by the project, that they required a greater capital investment. So I think that balance from the regulator can help the banks make more direct and quicker decisions and to facilitate the route. So for those who have to make the decisions can have a better business case. So I think in that case, from risk management, an action of the regulator from the framework of capital investment could be interesting to catalyze this at the regional and global levels. Thank you, Ignacio. Well, thank you very much, Franco, again, and Malia, thank you also. And as a matter of fact, talking a little bit about the regulators, it takes me to the following question. We went on to ask Teresa from the Instituto Escolia that has been advancing in this study that she talked about the funding of the circular economy in the Latin America and the Caribbean. And one part of this study, as a matter of fact, it was to do a mapping and to analyze a few of these policies that are being spearheaded from the regulatory standpoint from the government. So in that sense, if briefly, Teresa, you can maybe comment a little bit about the role of the regulators in this circular economy financing and how, and maybe you can give us some of the strides that have been made without necessarily giving us a spoiler alert of what you're finding in the study. Sure, I'm going to attempt to do this in a very quick manner, and that's why I also have a slide that I think could help to better understand this so I can talk a little less. Okay, so we're doing this study and considering a few of the countries in the region, and we basically have arrived at the conclusion that we're arriving at the conclusion that there are three levels of regulatory maturity in terms of integrating circular economy into the national policies from different countries. So those countries, generally speaking, begin to think about the issue of circular economy starting from the issue of residues or waste. How to manage solid waste from pollution, and normally the very first regulatory frameworks that have to do with circular economy are frameworks for waste management. As a matter of fact, there are some prohibitions in the use of plastic that exist in some of our countries in the region. There are a series of countries that are at that level. Colombia, Peru, Dominican Republic, and Brazil as well can be considered. That is also there, but it also has regulation that begins to consider a concept that is very important when we arrive at the second level, which is the concept of extension of product responsibility. The Brazilian law doesn't understand the issue of extension of the responsibility of the producer, but shared responsibility of the chain producers, which is more inclusive but more difficult to enforce because since it doesn't only befall on a single stakeholder, and it's rather diffuse, that responsibilities. So Brazil is making strides towards another level, and Costa Rica is a good example of a country that already has a legislation that's specific for production and sustainable production. That includes responsibility for the producer, but for the use and for the waste of their products. And that somehow also handles a principle of efficiency and the use of natural resources and the flow of materials throughout the entire chain. And then we can get to the more advanced level, which are those countries that have laws and public policies that talk about circular economy specifically and that define the concept of a circular economy in a complex manner, as we define here, as the MacArthur Foundation defines it. And when we have Chile, for example, that doesn't have a circular economy law, but nevertheless has a law that covers a series of issues that are important for circular economy, and it's also a country that was a pioneer in the financing of circular economy, specifically with the Promotion Corporation of Chile, Corfo, and other institutions that are certainly fostering circular economy in the region. And then we also have Mexico that currently has a circular economy law that is already at the Senate right now, if approved, will be among the first countries in the region with a more ambitious legal framework and more appropriate one that better integrates the concept of circular economy to its laws and policies. As a matter of fact, by fostering an integration of that legal framework with other regulatory frameworks that already exist in the country, so that somehow is the panorama of the regulatory frameworks for circular economy in the region. And we hope that by illustrating them in this manner, we can contribute toward us increasing the ambition of those countries toward a legal framework that can truly regulate circular economy and integrate several public policies in that effort. Thank you. Well, thank you, Teresa. And, to close our session, the conclusion here, as we've begun, I started talking about that this transition in Latin America and the Caribbean towards a circular economy has already begun. Today, I think we've demonstrated with a few examples from the financial sector and from public policy that these steps are being taken towards circular economy, and therefore I think that this is the juncture to integrate and strengthen these puzzle pieces, as we were mentioning, and start truly working in a circular system that is collaborative among the various agencies. As a very quick conclusion then, half a minute each, please, if you could arrive at a conclusion or a last parting thought, as a matter of fact, from this funding of a circular economy thought, or where you think that we should shoot towards, what would that be? Let's see if we can start with Amalia. Thank you, Ignacio. I have a comment left that was made by Franco, and I wanted to connect it with another idea. Franco said that the important thing is to fund viable products. We're always going to be funding viable projects. And I would also add and say, today, for a project to be viable, they must have other types of requirements connected to that circular economy agenda. And that makes banks as well as financiers can also update themselves so they can become agents of change, and also for the clients. And all of that is going to happen because if we have better clients, our business is going to be a lot better. So the interest of the customer is the interest of the business, of the bank as well. Oh, thank you, Amalia. How about you, Teresa? Well, first of all, it's a pleasure for me to be here again and share this with Franco and Amalia. And the financial sector has a big challenge ahead of itself. And but thinking about the role of the financial sector, which is the issue of our panel, I think Franco mentioned a very interesting topic, which is the role of the financial sector as a sector that can connect various stakeholders of the productive chain. You're responsible to fund all of the stages of the production chain, and sometimes the stakeholder is not aware that they can be connected with another, or that they can optimize the flow of resources among various types of businesses. So I think the financial sector has that role of becoming the liaison between those. Franco. Ignacio, I fully agree, first of all, with the comments from Amalia and Teresa. I think these are essential. And 3 points, I think three parting comments very quickly that are interrelated. First, long-term vision. We cannot lose this in the sustainability, the vision in the long term. Those business cases are closing going forward, but it's a long-term vision that has to be, 1. 2, the business model, the business itself. As Malia said, it's not just the financial. It has to be viable in the financial, environmental, social, and circular. So let's not lose sight of that, because that's a business model. This is competitive, profitable. This is one of the best businesses for society. Second. And third, an urgent call. We have to act immediately because the opportunities are there. We can be left behind. The benefits that these generate are absolutely necessary so that our economic model, our life as we know it, with all the good things, can continue forward. So in that route, it's important to understand that we have to move very quickly in this agenda to materialize opportunities and materialize a better future. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Amalia, Teresa, Franco. It's been a pleasure for me really to host this panel and the information that has come forth. To all the attendees, and thank you for your kind interest in participating in this panel for the role of financial institutions in the financing of circular economies and participating in this roundtable of sustainable financing of UNEP-FI. Without any further ado, let's just say goodbye and invite you to consult some of our publications from UNEP-FI and issues of sustainable finances, especially with today's issue, the publication on financing circularity and finances for a circular economy, that you can find it in the web page in UNEP-FI. And to thank again all for your interest from UNEP-FI, UNEP, and we are at your service and in contact for everything that you need to expand in information. Thank you all very much.